back, everyone. U.S. auto sales took a downturn. It posted their worst year in more than a decade. And supply chain problems put a dent in sales.
Jeep and Ram just crashed. And I don't mean on the road. In a single day, their stock dropped 30%. Gone. Just like that. We're talking billions of dollars wiped off the map before most people even finished their morning coffee. And the crazy part? Most people have absolutely no idea it even happened. Now here's where it gets insane. Stellantis, the parent company behind Jeep, Dodge, and Ram, just announced a $26.5 billion loss on projects that completely fell apart. $26.5 billion flushed away. But here's the number that should stop you cold. Their entire company, Jeep, Dodge, Ram, all of it, is only worth $21.2 billion today. Let that sink in for a second. They didn't just lose money, they lost more money than their whole company is actually worth. That's not a bad quarter, that's not a rough patch. That is a company that is hanging on by its fingernails. And right now, they are in full desperation mode. We're talking about taking on $6 billion in brand new debt just to keep the lights on. We're talking about selling off pieces of their own business, like a family selling furniture just to make rent. We're talking about canceling payments to their own investors, scrapping years of plans overnight, and pivoting so fast it would make your head spin. Every single move they're making right now has one thing in common: panic. And look, I say all of this as someone who genuinely loves these brands. The Wrangler, the Ram truck, the muscle car legacy of Dodge. These aren't just vehicles. For millions of Americans, they're part of who you are. Your first truck, your weekend warrior, the thing you saved up for and finally drove off the lot with a huge smile on your face. But here's the part that nobody in the mainstream media is talking about. When a company this big starts making moves this desperate, emergency debt, asset sales, production cuts, factory shutdowns, there is always a ripple effect. And that ripple doesn't stop at the boardroom door. It travels straight down the line, through the factories, through the dealerships, and eventually, it lands right in the lap of the everyday person who just signed a 5-year loan on a brand new Ram 1500 or drove home in a shiny new Wrangler. So here's the question that should be keeping every Jeep and Ram owner up at night. If the company behind your vehicle is fighting this hard just to survive, who is actually going to be there to back you up when something goes wrong? Because when companies this desperate start cutting corners to stay alive, somebody always ends up holding the bag. And history tells us it's never the guys in the corner office. Stay with me, because what's coming next is worse than you think. Here is one number that should change the way you think about the American car industry forever. 30%. Not 30% off on a holiday sale. Not 30% fewer complaints on a customer survey. 30% of an entire company's value gone. Erased. Wiped out in a single trading day like it never existed in the first place. That is what just happened to Stellantis, the parent company behind Jeep, Dodge, and Ram. Brands that millions of Americans have trusted for decades. Brands that sit in driveways from Maine to Montana. Brands that built their reputations on toughness, capability, and the idea that an American-made truck could handle anything you threw at it. One announcement. One day. 30% gone. Now, before we go any further, let's make sure we're clear on what 30% actually means at this scale. Because when a company this size loses that much value that fast, we're not talking about a bad week on Wall Street. We're talking about the kind of number that makes investors run for the exits, the kind of number that triggers emergency meetings, the kind of number that turns confident executives into desperate ones overnight. And here's the announcement that caused it. Stellantis just confirmed a $26.5 billion write-down. That is the official accounting term for money they spent on projects that completely failed. $26.5 billion poured into plans, mostly EV projects, that fell apart and will never come back. Now here is where the story stops being just a business headline and starts being something every car buyer in America needs to pay attention to. Stellantis, as a whole company, is worth $21.2 billion today. Jeep, Dodge, Ram, all of it. Every factory, every brand, every logo, every vehicle rolling off every assembly line. The whole thing combined is worth $21.2 billion. They lost $26.5 billion on failed projects alone. That means they lost $5 billion more than their entire company is actually worth. Read that again. The money they burned through on EV bets that went nowhere is greater than the total value of everything they own. That is not a rough patch. That is not a speed bump. That is a company that has already spent its future and is now trying to figure out how to survive the present. The automotive elite have been playing a very expensive game. They chased the next big trend. They bet billions on a future that did not arrive on schedule. And while the press conferences looked great, the big screens, the dramatic music, the gleaming concept vehicles, the actual numbers were telling a completely different story underneath. And now that story is impossible to hide. A 30% stock crash does not happen because things are going well. It does not happen because investors are overreacting. It happens because the people who know the most about a company look at the books, look at the plan, and decide they want out. The question is what comes next. Because the plan Stellantis put together to save itself, every single piece of it tells you exactly how serious this really is. So what does a company do when it has lost more money than it is worth? When the stock has collapsed 30% in a single day and the whole world is watching to see if you survive? You go into emergency mode. And that is exactly what Stellantis did. They came out with a plan. 5 moves designed to stop the bleeding, buy some time, and convince investors that the people in charge still know what they are doing. And on the surface, if you read the press release, it almost sounds reasonable, responsible even. But pull back the curtain on each one of these moves and a very different picture comes into focus. Because this is not a recovery plan. This is a survival ration. This is a company rationing its last resources and hoping the situation turns around before those resources run out completely. Here is what they announced. First, Stellantis is taking on $6 billion in brand new debt. $6 billion just to have cash available. They call it liquidity. What it actually is borrowing money to replace the money they already burned through. And here's the problem with that. Debt is not income. Debt has to be paid back with interest. So while that $6 billion sits in the bank and looks good on paper today, it is a weight around the company's neck that gets heavier every single month. Second move, they are scrapping the majority of their EV plans, including the electric trucks. Now, to be fair, this is probably the right call. These EV projects are what got them into this hole in the first place. Stopping the bleeding is better than letting it continue. But walking away from billions of dollars in development work is not a strategy. It is damage control. There is a difference. Third, they are cutting dividend payments for 2026. Translation: they are no longer returning money to their own investors. Think about what that signals. When a company stops paying dividends, it is telling the people who believed in it enough to invest their money that there is simply nothing left to give back right now. Every dollar has to stay inside the building. That is not confidence. That is a company holding its breath. Fourth move. They are selling 49% of a joint battery venture, selling off pieces of your own business to raise cash. This is the moment in every financial collapse story that should make you stop and pay attention. Because companies that are winning do not sell their assets. they buy more. When you start selling what you own just to cover what you owe, you are not recovering. You are retreating. And fifth, they are pivoting back to gas and hybrid models. Following the same path Ford and GM have already taken as the EV dream collides with market reality, which would be a smart move, except the other manufacturers made this pivot from a position of strength. Stellantis is making it from a position of desperation. And those two things do not lead to the same outcome. Now here's the part the press release will never tell you. Even as Stellantis raises cash through debt, asset sales, and dividend cuts, their cash flow is still going negative. More money is going out than coming in. You can fill a bucket all day long, but if there is a hole in the bottom, you are not solving the problem. You are just delaying it. And a delayed problem at this scale does not quietly go away. It gets worse. Before we go further, if you are thinking about buying a car in 2026, you need my free ebook, Avoid These 17 Cars. In 2026, the link is in the description. It is completely free, and it could save you thousands. Now, back to the collapse. Here is the thing about a company in free fall. The damage never stays contained to the boardroom. It does not stop at the factory gate or the corporate headquarters or the quarterly earnings report. It travels, it spreads, and it follows a very predictable path that we have seen play out in the American economy before. First, the company slows down. Then the factories go quiet. Then the workers go home. And then the ripple hits everyone else. That is exactly what is unfolding right now with Stellantis. And it is moving faster than most people realize. The plan calls for production slowdowns across their manufacturing operations, which sounds like a boring corporate decision until you think about what a production slowdown actually means in the real world. It means factories running at reduced capacity. It means shifts getting cut. It means managers walking the floor and doing the math on how many people they actually need versus how many they currently have. And when a company in financial distress does that math, the answer is always the same: layoffs. Stellantis has already begun that process, and the timing could not be worse. Because the American job market right now is not in a position to absorb another wave of displaced workers. Layoffs are happening across multiple industries simultaneously. Companies are tightening, budgets are shrinking, and every worker who loses their income is one less person who can walk into a dealership and drive something home. This is where the spiral becomes truly vicious. And it is worth slowing down to understand exactly how it works, because this is how big companies die. Fewer workers means fewer paychecks. Fewer paychecks means fewer buyers. Fewer buyers means vehicles sitting on dealership lots for weeks and months instead of days. And when those lots fill up with unsold inventory, trucks and SUVs collecting dust in the sun, the dealerships stop placing new orders with Stellantis. Why would they order more product they cannot sell? So now the manufacturer loses the revenue from those dealer orders on top of everything else, which forces another round of production cuts, which forces more layoffs, which removes more buyers from the market. Cut production. Fire workers. Sell less. Cut production again. The cycle feeds itself until something breaks. And here's the part of this story that rarely gets told. This collapse does not just hurt the executives who made the bad bets. It does not just hurt the shareholders who watched the stock drop 30% in a single morning. It reaches all the way down to the small, independent used car dealer working out of a modest lot somewhere in Middle America. The kind of dealer who depends on Stellantis trade-ins coming through the auction so they have inventory to sell. No trade-ins means no auction cars. No auction cars means an empty lot. An empty lot means no sales. No sales means no payroll. This is the real cost of what is happening. Not a line on a spreadsheet. Not a percentage point on a stock chart. Real businesses. Real workers. Real families absorbing the consequences of decisions made by people who will walk away from this with their own finances entirely intact. When the industry giants stumble, it is never the people at the top who feel the ground shake first. It is everyone else. And right now, the ground is shaking. The question is, how far the cracks are going to spread before something is done to stop them. To understand how Stellantis ended up here, you have to go back to the beginning of the BET, the decision that started all of this. The moment a company with genuine heritage, genuine loyal customers, and genuine American identity decided to chase a trend instead of serve the people who had been buying their vehicles for decades. The BET was on electric vehicles, and they did not go in small. They went all in. Billions and billions of dollars committed to an electric future that was supposed to arrive on a very specific timeline. The projections looked great in the boardroom. The press releases sounded visionary. The concept vehicles were stunning under the showroom lights. And the executives who made these calls were celebrated as forward thinkers who understood where the industry was heading. Except the market had other plans. Consumer demand for electric vehicles did not scale the way the projections promised. Charging infrastructure did not develop fast enough. The buyers who were supposed to flood dealerships looking for electric Jeeps and electric Ram trucks did not show up in the numbers that justified the investment. And the money Stellantis had already spent could not be unspent. $26.5 billion committed to a future that did not arrive on schedule. Now here is the important thing to understand. Stellantis is not alone in this. Ford made the same mistake. GM made the same mistake. The entire industry got caught up in the race to electrify and overestimated how quickly American buyers would make the switch. But Ford and GM had enough financial cushion to absorb the damage and correct course without threatening the survival of the entire company. Stellantis did not have that cushion, and that difference is everything. But the EV overreach is only half the story, because the other half is what was happening to their core products, while all that money and attention was flowing toward an electric future that never materialized. The Wrangler used to be something special, simple, rugged, honest. A vehicle that did exactly what it promised, and did it for years without drama. The 4.0 inline-six engine that powered those older Jeeps was genuinely bulletproof. Mechanics loved it. Owners loved it. People drove those things into the ground and then drove them some more. The engineering was straightforward because the priority was reliability, not spectacle. That is not what you get today. Today's Wrangler costs $50,000, sometimes $60,000. And what do you get for that price? Complicated electronics that create headaches. Reliability scores that would embarrass a vehicle costing half as much. A death wobble at highway speeds that has generated thousands of complaints and never been fully resolved. An experience that consistently fails to justify the premium attached to that iconic 7-slot grille. They took a legend and turned it into a liability. And year after year, instead of addressing the core product problems, the press conferences kept coming. Big screens, dramatic music, a Ram truck launching off a sand dune in slow motion, promises about the next big thing that was going to turn everything around. The message was always the same: trust us, the best is coming. But the customers stopped trusting. The sales numbers started slipping, and the warning signs were right there for anyone willing to look past the marketing. The data was telling the truth the whole time. The question was whether anyone at the top was willing to listen to it. Clearly, they were not. Right now, a lot of Jeep and Ram owners are asking the same question. And honestly, it is the right question to be asking. If Stellantis is this close to the edge, if the cash is running out and the plan is not working, what actually happens to these brands? What happens to the dealerships? And is someone about to start selling Wranglers at half price just to raise cash fast? The answer is no. And understanding why tells you something important about how this industry actually works. Here is what most people do not realize. When you walk into a Jeep dealership, that building, that lot, those vehicles sitting under the lights, none of that belongs to Stellantis. The dealership is its own separate business. It owns the vehicles on its lot. It operates independently. Stellantis is essentially a supplier to that dealership, not the landlord, not the owner, not the boss. They sell vehicles to the dealer pays for them, and from that point forward, those vehicles belong to the dealership. So when Stellantis runs out of cash, when the parent company starts its descent, the dealership does not automatically go down with it. A well-run dealership can keep its doors open, keep selling its existing inventory, and keep serving customers through the entire transition. The financial crisis at the top does not instantly translate into chaos at the lot level. That is a critical distinction that the headlines tend to miss completely. And a fire sale is not coming either, because Stellantis does not own the Jeeps sitting on that lot. The dealership does. And if the dealership is financially healthy, it has no reason to slash prices. It does not need Stellantis' cash. It has its own. So what does actually happen when a company like Stellantis cannot stop the bleeding? History gives us a very clear answer. The assets that still hold value get packaged up and sold. The brands that people still recognize, still want, still associate with something real, those get acquired by another automotive group, willing to bet that the name is worth more than the company currently surrounding it. And in Stellantis' case, there are names here that still carry genuine weight. Jeep is one of the most recognized automotive brands on the planet. Ram has a loyal truck buyer base that runs deep. Dodge carries muscle car heritage that enthusiasts have never stopped loving. Even Chrysler, despite being largely hollowed out at this point, carries enough nostalgia that it would likely get bundled into any sale package. These names will not disappear. What will disappear is the corporate structure currently holding them together. A new owner steps in, the brands continue, the dealerships adjust, and life goes on, at least for the nameplates. But here is where the real danger lives. The window between now and that outcome is where everything gets uncertain. Because if Stellantis cannot generate enough cash flow to last through the transition, if the debt piles up faster than the assets can be sold and the new owner identified, then the disruption becomes serious. Parts availability becomes unpredictable. Warranty support becomes a question mark. Production stops in ways that are no longer planned but forced. And the people caught in the middle of that disruption are not the executives. They are the owners of a 2-year-old Ram 1500 who just noticed something wrong with their transmission and are wondering if anyone is still going to be there to stand behind it. That is not a hypothetical. That is the risk that is already sitting in driveways across America right now. Let's play out the best-case scenario. Let's say tomorrow morning Stellantis wakes up, the right people are finally in the room, and somebody makes the call that should have been made years ago. A straightforward, affordable, reliable truck. Something in the $30,000 range. No gimmicks, no unnecessary technology. Just a well-built vehicle that everyday Americans can actually afford to put in their driveway. Everyone would want one. The demand would be immediate and enormous. And it still might not save the company. Here is why. From the moment a decision like that gets made to the moment that truck rolls off an assembly line and onto a dealership lot, you are looking at a minimum of 2 to 3 years. Research and development, engineering, testing, manufacturing preparation, supply chain coordination. 2 to 3 years at the absolute best. And right now, with negative cash flow and a balance sheet that is deteriorating by the quarter, Stellantis may not have a 2 to 3 year runway left to work with. The right decision made too late is still the wrong outcome. But even if the timing somehow worked out, there is still another wall waiting on the other side. The dealerships. Because even if Stellantis managed to produce an affordable, high-demand truck at a price point that would genuinely move the needle, They cannot control what happens to that price once it reaches the lot. Dealers can stack on market adjustments. They can bundle mandatory add-ons. They can price a $30,000 truck straight out of reach for the exact buyers it was designed to serve. This is the stranglehold at the center of the entire automotive system. Manufacturers need dealers to sell their product at the right price. Dealers need manufacturers to supply them with product people actually want. And either side can quietly destroy what the other is trying to build. Bad product from the manufacturer and dealers cannot sell it. Hot product at a low price, and dealers exploit the demand, and the customer pays the penalty. Stellantis is trapped inside that system right now, with very little leverage and very little time. And the CEO who spent his energy attacking content creators for pointing all of this out? The 30% crash answered that argument better than any video ever could. So what does all of this mean for you? For the person watching this right now, who is either driving a Jeep or Ram today, or thinking about buying one tomorrow? It means the stakes just changed, and you need to factor that into every decision you make at the dealership from this point forward. When a manufacturer is fighting for survival, the first things that get quietly compromised are the things that protect you after the sale. Warranty support gets harder to access. Parts availability gets unpredictable. The dealer network shrinks as weaker stores close. And the confidence you had when you signed that purchase agreement starts looking a lot less solid in the rearview mirror. This is what the luxury trap always looked like underneath the surface. You pay a premium price and assume you are buying premium security. But security requires stability. And right now, stability is the one thing Stellantis cannot honestly promise anyone. Meanwhile, the brands that have been quietly doing the boring, unglamorous work of building reliable vehicles at honest prices, Toyota, Honda, Subaru, Mazda, are not having these conversations. Their factories are not slowing down. Their warranties are not in question. Their resale values are not in free fall. The financial triple win still applies here. Repairs, insurance, resale. Run those numbers on a current Ram or Jeep against a Toyota Tacoma or Honda CR-V, and the gap tells you everything you need to know without a single press release or earnings call. Watch what happens next with Stellantis closely. Production cut announcements, plant closure news, brand sale rumors. These are the signals that tell you how much runway they actually have left. But more than anything, remember this. The industry counts on you making emotional decisions. Buying the badge, buying the legend, buying the feeling. The smartest thing you can do right now is buy the data instead. You just watched this entire story unfold. You know what the numbers say. You know what the warning signs look like. That already puts you ahead of most people walking into a dealership today. Go back to where this story started. One announcement. One day. 30% of an entire company's value gone before the close of business. That number is not just a stock market statistic. It is a warning. A signal that something fundamental has broken inside one of the most iconic automotive empires America has ever produced. And whether you love these brands or have never owned one in your life, the ripple effects of what happens next will touch the entire industry. Because this is never just about one company. It is about what happens when the priority shifts from building something great to chasing something trendy. When the badge becomes more important than the engineering underneath it. When the press conference matters more than the product. Stellantis did not collapse in a single day. It collapsed over years of decisions that looked bold on a screen and proved hollow on the road. The real luxury has never been the logo on the grille. It has always been the freedom that comes from owning something reliable. Something that starts every morning without drama. Something that does not drain your savings or strand your family or leave you fighting a warranty claim with a company that is fighting its own survival. That freedom is still available. But it requires paying attention to the right numbers instead of the right nameplate. And if you want to make sure your next vehicle purchase does not become your most expensive mistake, download my free ebook. Avoid these 17 cars in 2026. The link is in the description. It is completely free, and it could save you thousands. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Are you still buying Jeep? Let's talk.